So I want to talk a little bit about communism, and I haven't read Das Kapital, but I plan on doing it after the audiobook I'm making now. Um, but I think that communism is itself a very bad idea of practicality. I guess sort of the summary I can get of communism is the idea that the working people should own the means of production, and that the overall the elites in society are basically kind of taking their work away from them, and that's sort of the basic summary I know of it. I do think the problem with the definition of what a worker is what is considered a worker. Is it isn't it just the people who work? No, the business owner and such. So that's the problem with communism, is it doesn't really have an idea of what is considered um, unjust or something. That it's more like a theory, I think. So I think it would serve more better as a philosophy than an actual practical idea. I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that China practiced authoritarianism in terms of not allowing national elections, then I actually think that would be a good way to look at it. If China had like elected officials, then I actually think that would actually serve as a good model. But considering that it basically run under like an under CCP, which is authoritarian China, then I don't think that's it basically doesn't serve the purpose, because they do practice some functional capitalism, but the way that the system is run on lack of freedom of speech and democracy is why it isn't like the ideal model, basically. But outside that, it could be actually a good thing to have it actually like a philosophy and not so much as a practical idea, basically. Use something that works and just abandon what is fantasy thinking, basically. But I want to mention something about the whole kind of pressure thinking way of I mean, I'm sort of guilty of this myself in terms of trying to accuse someone of being authoritarian without with without any justification of it. For example, I do think, for example, Joseph McCarthy had a right idea of it when he was at least in office, because there was actually people who in a sense had connection with the USSR, and that would be treason. So at least he wasn't unjust in terms of what his method was in the beginning of it. But what I mean is, in terms of the whole insulting people, rather than trying to come up with valid argument, I guess that's kind of the problem in a sense. But I also do think that's more of a communication problem, because lots of people kind of just people don't want their stuff taken away, so they get very emotional about it, and that's sensible. And then and then there is like a little bit more of a how to say it, people who at least are left wingers in the United States. They often have a very sort of like a very condescending way of communicating with right wingers, and I guess that's a huge issue, because they don't try to communicate on a sensical level, and it's more emotional, And I do think it's more a problem with both sides. They kind of have a very emotional attachment to such thing, and I do think that the blame for this is the two-party system, and I've been very consistent about it. It's the two-party system that makes this. Let me get my guns and shoot some commies, and then they all decide to just want to kill fascists, who they deem as fascists. And it's really the two parties that it's basically very. It's essentially rewarding the elites who have made this system, in terms of because you don't actually vote in this system, really. You just vote for a candidate, and it has to abide by whatever establishment rules, like Democrats or Republicans. It's all the same thing. It's basically the top elites who kind of decide some rules, and it's barely democratic, really, in terms of how they work. So you can argue whether USA is an authoritarian country or a democratic one, but it's barely democratic with the way it works, actually. But yeah, but the point is, in terms of a real democracy, it would be something like multi-party system, let people vote, on a national level. At least that would be sensible. But I also want to talk about the way internet works with the whole outrage thing. Like I think there's this whole idea of trying to get people to make them look so stupid as possible rather than actually trying to win an argument is a little bit of a problem, really, because it kind of makes you look like you're just trying to get cheap shots. And I guess well, I'm a little unsure who started this, but maybe they always existed because of the system it works on. But for example, Fox News in the 1990s, that's when it started, at least in the mid 90s. The whole trying to just make people look stupid rather than actually try to come with a compelling argument. And then you have also the Young Turks, which also is kind of traitors, I think, because it's kind of kind of like a hack news journalism that has some connections to Al Jazeera, which Al Jazeera is known for basically being saying one thing to the Arab world and another thing to the international world. So I don't trust the Young Turks at all. But you have people who jumped up like Jimmy Dore, who I think is kind of cool. But even though I guess people try to undermine because of the whole. Yeah, I guess there's some kind of chaotic system with the way it works. But I do think freedom of speech is very important though in terms of trying to have discussions as such. But basically, the whole idea of trying to just make people look stupid rather than actually trying to prove a point is kind of the problem, you know. So how can you really have consistent talk on something when the idea is just to make them look like jackasses? I mean, nobody likes that. And it should be more like a thing that's more suited for video game players. Just you suck, rather than actual serious political debates. But yeah. And I also found it a little bit funny with there was a movie I watched which called Alita Battle Angel, which is a very good movie. I actually liked it a lot, but I read it in comment section, which was too funny. But someone tried to argue that it was a pro-communist movie because you have people who are in the slums or people who work for Salem, which is the ruling people in the sky, and then people in Salem are like the rich people, or they are like the well-off people who don't live down there, and people who basically work under Salem, they are basically kind of forced to work in a sense. So I always found that funny that they kind of try to connect that to communism. It's a good movie, but I always sort of think of it more like a tyrannical or some kind of tyrannical thing in the sky. But that's just all I see it. But yeah, it's kind of interesting with how people try to look at some stuff. And yeah, but yeah, in general, I think communism will be better as an idea, as an philosophy. But in practice, the problem with communism, at least the end result, is you kind of have this idea that okay, the workers are supposed to be the one that profits, and it should not be the elites who exploit the workers. So basically, it should be sort of like a equalitarian system, basically, where people who feel oppressed should not be oppressed. And the problem is there's some communication barrier because what communist regime has always led to is there's like a dictator that basically decides this. And the problem is if you don't have opposition parties, then what do you have? You don't have anything. You just have an oppressive regime, and that's why communism never works in practice. It's why capitalism, which is the work effort of people, works, because they have to kind of work a business or something from the bottom to the top in terms of basically trying to get society to run and function. I guess the only realistic thing that works is social democracy, and I'm mostly a fan of that and decentralization system of Denmark because I do think there's decentralizing the government is actually making more work actually in public. And I may have been some critical of state doctor system of sociologists and social workers because I guess maybe I see it as exploitable. Maybe I'm full of shit on that one, uh, but uh, but yeah, that's just what I want to say on that one at least. And I also want to talk a little about the online culture. I think there's people trying to pressure people to think certain way, like oh, that's those people, those are bad if they talk or look like that. Which I guess it kind of is a little bit pre- have a little bit of a prejudged way of thinking, which I do think is kind of legit on humans. You know, for example, I don't like hipsters. I've been very clear on that one why I hate hipsters, um, but yeah, maybe there's too much of that in politics, and maybe people just don't focus on goals and more like, hey, what does this guy wear, or how does this guy look like, and you're just gonna make fun of that for that one. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that helps the political discussions. You know, but yeah, I guess people also like people who are not boring too, because people who can be factual can also be very boring compared to people who are entertaining. So I guess there's some kind of shallow outlook that is a problem too. But yeah, I just want to have a little bit short discussion on that one. But let me know what you think. Thank you for listening, and bye.